On 8 months now.
Bro, if you don't get your own office by 1 year.
Alright, thank you.
This goes with your
All right, you guys ready to start?
side.
I'm really excited about today. I mentioned this to you last class period, but today we have the privilege of having Mary McEvoy talk to us about why Ireland is such an attractive place for companies to do business and to relocate there. And since we just talked about international business strategy earlier this week, it'll give you an opportunity to think about Ireland through the lens of some of the things we talked about. And I full disclosure, one of the things I told you at the beginning of the semester is I try to only teach facts based on research, but if I ever give you my opinion or I have a bias, I'll tell you, I am very biased towards Ireland. To me, it's a very interesting country, their culture, and because of some of their attributes of the country that make it an attractive place for business. I think when countries are pro-business, it's good for the people that live there. You know, if you approach it in a what we call a kind of a conscious capitalism approach, a long-term approach. And so Mary is with an organization called ID Ireland, and I'll let her explain that a little bit more to you. But kind of her whole job is explaining to companies in the United States why Ireland is such an attractive place. So I can't think of anybody more appropriate to talk to you about Ireland than her. So welcome to the University of Tulsa.
Thank you so much. Appreciate the invitation, and it's great to have the opportunity to talk to you guys. So we keep it very interactive, so stop me, ask questions as we go. A little bit about my background. I'm from Ireland. You can probably tell by the accent or the green dress. I've spent half my career living in the US, working for the Irish government in different capacities. I suppose my background is I have a business degree, a business and Spanish degree, and then I did an MBA, and then a diploma in strategy and innovation. So I'm really interested in those topics as well. And I honestly, worked in the private sector for a while in business development and sales. I love all that side of things. But what I do now is I sell Ireland, and there's no better job because it's so easy to do. I'm very passionate about what I do because what I do every day is create jobs for people back in my country. And so that gives me a great sense of purpose in what I do. So I would definitely advise you all as you start your careers yourself, find something that gives you purpose because it doesn't even feel like a job. And when you look back and you think about your legacy and what you've contributed to society, I remember at one time I was being interviewed for my first government job, and they were like, why do you want to change it? So, because right now all I'm doing is buying my boss a bigger car. And literally my boss would just show me this brand new car he'd gotten, and because I was really good at sales, and I thought, that's it, that's all I'm doing, is buying this guy a bigger car. So now it's really rewarding what I do. So IDA Ireland is a government agency that was set up to try and help bring companies to Ireland. So have any of you ever been to Ireland? Know anything about Ireland? Okay, great, too. And what comes to mind when you think about Ireland? What would you say? Surely there's something Irish that you all know.
I loved it. It was so beautiful. We had a lot of fish and chips and Guinness, and it was divine.
And combined is actually great as well. I mean, I'm sure you've all heard of St. Patrick's Day, no?
Yes.
Yeah? So a couple of lessons from an Irish person on St. Patrick's Day I need to communicate to every American I meet. First of all, it's called St. Patrick's Day. You can say St. Paddy's Day. You can never say St. Patty's Day because the short for Patrick is not Patty. We don't know where that came from in the US. Or St. Pat. So we like Patrick or Paddy's. You don't pinch anyone for not wearing green. Totally American thing that they came up with as well. So, and you guys celebrate it way more than we do. We don't wear green at all. We just have a day off. We barely have parades. So when people come to America, they're like, wow, look at the way they celebrate our holiday. We're such a small country. So it's great fun, but yeah, so please spread the word. Never ever St. Patty's Day. That's really important to us. Our national language is called Irish. Gaelic is a made-up word. Gaelic doesn't exist. That's what everyone calls our language here is Gaelic. They said, you speak Gaelic? I'm like, no, but I speak Irish. So another thing that just changes. So just Chinese whispers, I think things get lost in translation, right? So let me just give you a little bit of the history. So I'm sure in elementary school you learned something very famous happened in Ireland, a great tragedy in the 1800s. Anyone ring a bell?
The famine.
The famine. Okay, so do you remember what caused the famine?
Potatoes.
Crop,
Yeah.
got like
Exactly. So, I mean, basically, Ireland had been an independent country, and then back in many, many years ago, for 700 years, it was colonized by Britain. As many countries around the world, they're one of the great colonization countries like Spain and Portugal, and Britain were probably the primary ones, and France too. So for many, many years, so what happened is land that was ours was taken by the British, and they put in British landlords. I'm sure you've watched Braveheart, it's a little like that up in Scotland, similar, right? And so all the crops that were grown in Ireland, Ireland was just an agricultural country. That's all we did is grew crops primarily. And they had to send everything to Britain to feed the bigger population there. We had about 8 million people in Ireland, whereas they had 50 million in the UK. And then the only thing we were allowed to keep was potatoes, because for some reason potatoes were considered like a basic food, humble food. But you know, fish and chips, you can't beat the chips you get in Ireland. They're the best. Like, I miss the potatoes in Ireland, let me say. So every Irish meal has potato to this day. And actually you could have 2 or 3 types of potato in a meal, some meals. So this, yeah, they were allowed to keep the potato. So over a 7-year period, there was this bad disease, potato blight, that just destroyed all the potatoes. And so the people were left with nothing to eat. And even though they were growing all these crops, they still had to ship them over, and people literally starved to death. So from the 8 million people we had, 1 million died pretty quickly, another million or so emigrated. So our population went down and down and down. And then people continued so when I was born, 50 years ago now, there was only 3 million people in Ireland. So we went from 8 million down to 3. But today we're back up to 5. And that's because of a strategy that the government implemented to attract business to Ireland and to generate an economy that would work. So once the potato famine ended in 1845, it was another 70 years, but there was 70 people were really angry about what happened naturally, right? And so many people had left the country, and the country was decimated. So it just caused a big uprising where the Irish people said, we want our country back, we've had enough, right? So they attacked the landlords, everything. Like you've seen, there's not a movie about the famine, but it is similar somewhat to Braveheart. But ultimately, only in 1922 did we become our own independent country again. So we're barely 100 years an independent country that we know of. And then when we got this country back, we had nothing. Back to this agricultural, poor, uneducated. Everyone had spoken Irish up to that point, and they were forced to speak English, so Irish was gone as a language. Education was kind of poor, so that's what the government of the time, the new government 100 years ago, said, we need to put a strategy in place to, first of all, educate our people. Because without education, how are they going to succeed? So now we are the most educated population in the whole of Europe. 62% of people in Ireland have a third level qualification. And the average in Europe is 40-something%. I don't know what it would be in the US exactly, but it's definitely very high. Education is free in Ireland. Right through college. We pay nothing. I was saying to the guys last night, my daughter's here with me, and she refused to go back to Ireland for the free education. She stayed at UT. Anyway, she's costing me money when she shouldn't. So that was a big turning point. But more than that, 70 years ago, our agency was established, IDA Ireland, and we were the first country in the world to do this, because we said, look, we're a small island on the edge of Europe. Nobody even knows we're here. And we joined the European Union 50 years ago. And that was really critical, because what happens with the European Union, there's 27 countries in it right now, because a certain country left. And there's 27 countries now, but when we joined, we were the poorest of the countries. So we got money from the richer countries to build roads and railways and buildings and schools, and they gave us money for maybe 30 years. And then when we became the richer country, now we give money to the other countries. So all these newer countries that joined in Eastern Europe, Lithuania, all these other countries, we give them money now. And that's how it works. So every country is helping everyone so that we all live together. So the 27 countries all progress. So IDA Ireland came about 70 years ago, and I can't imagine who invested back then, but they did. And primarily what they did is the government said, we'll set up this agency, we'll reach out to companies around the world and persuade them to come to Ireland. And in the beginning, all they could do was reach out to people who were Irish American, who loved Ireland because of their history, because nobody would have wanted to invest, but they did. So companies came, and more. And that's what our agency does. So what I'm going to just talk through with a few slides for you guys is like FDI, as we call it, foreign direct investment. So we try to get foreign direct investment to come into Ireland, and that's all we do. We have 22 offices around the world, 8 of them in North America. And every day I go out and I meet companies and I talk to them and I say, hey, so how are you doing with your business? And what's your strategy? And what's your international strategy? Have you thought about that yet? And so when you do get to that point, how are you going to expand into, you know, all the countries. And they all kind of say Europe first because it's more or less like America, easier than, say, Asian countries to deal with in terms of laws and communication and all of that. So we try and influence them to set up in Ireland, and that they manage all of EMEA, Europe, Middle East and Asia, EMEA, from there. And they can do that. And so that's our primary goal. And so we talk to companies, and some companies, I was saying last night to the guys, like when we first met Facebook, they had 50 people. Nobody ever heard of them. They were in California. There's a little startup company, and we're like, hey, you guys ever think about setting up in Ireland? So most of the US companies, we've nearly 1,800 companies, multinationals in Ireland, and nearly 1,000 of those are American. But we've known them all since the beginning. Like Apple came in the 80s before there was ever anything. I don't know what they had in the 80s. They just had the old machines. But there's no iPhones or iPads, or they're not the company they are today. But because they've been embedded there for so long. So I'm just going to talk you through and show you some stats to give you some background. So the impact of FDI in Ireland is enormous. It is worth 31.5 billion euros to our economy. Now, I know you guys talk in trillions in America. This is huge for us. This would be like trillion to us. 70% of all the exports, of all the corporation tax. So we have two types of tax in Ireland. You have income tax and corporation tax that you charge companies. And our company tax for many, many years was 12.5%, which is the lowest of Europe. As our strategy as a government was like, we're not going to charge them a lot of tax. If they have more money, they'll invest it more and they'll build more, and they have. A lot of other countries around the world are annoyed by this, so we don't take a lot of the money. But you know what? They employ our people. So when we look at that, 300,000 employed. I mean, the population of people that can be employed in Ireland is just over 2 million. So that 300,000 of them are employed directly by these companies. And then a whole bunch of Irish companies had to start up to supply them and fund them and support them. So there's another hundreds of thousands of people employed in that way as well. The capital expenditure, 9.2 billion. So when they build these factories and these offices, and they employ people to do that, right, to fit them out, to build them. And then the exports is, say, 315 billion. Like, these numbers are enormous for us, and it's the impact for the whole country. And the fact that people are employed means they're not unemployed, and the government's not paying unemployment tax. So we have very low unemployment as well. So the existing base, which is really interesting, so of the 1,800 clients, half are in Ireland at least 10 years and 1/3 more than 20 years. So they come and they stay. Here's just some of the bigger names that you might be aware of. And in terms of winning foreign direct investment, so all these countries are trying to get these companies to come. Ireland's number 7 at 4%. But look, our share of Europe's population, we don't even have 1% of Europe's population. We get 4% and we're number 7. So it's massive in terms of the impact it has in our country, and that we're really successful at doing it. And they're the other countries who are higher than us, but all of those, look, they have a much higher percentage of the European population than we do. So how and why do we do it? So when we asked people generally, why do you think Ireland wins the business? You just go, oh, you guys have low tax, right? You ask any of our companies, they won't even mention tax to you. The company I just met yesterday, actually, they don't even have tax in Ireland because it's a cost centre. So that's another way you can have a business, that you don't even have tax through the country. Lots of them are like that. This is why they do it. And so we call it STEP, as in trying to explain it, but here's the main reasons. One of them, which has always been the case since 100 years ago, that we have a very stable economic and political environment. And we never even used to talk about that because it was just a given. But actually, when you look around the world, what's happening now, you know, when the war broke out in Ukraine and Russia, we got calls from companies who are in Ireland but also have offices there saying, oh my God, can we bring our staff into Ireland and out of Russia, out of Ukraine? They're afraid the Russian team are going to be conscripted into the army. And it was a big mad rush to get them moved, and we helped them get visas over to Ireland, that type of thing. And then even just the political environment, I mean, the politics here are very different to the politics in Ireland. All the parties in Ireland are all the same. They all say the same thing. They're all in the middle. We have no left wing, we have no right wing, and we consider our politics very boring. And when I hear them given out of our politics, I'm like, listen, I live in America. People won't even talk to each other. So it is very different, but it makes it easy. You've access. We change our prime minister. It's called a Taoiseach in Irish. We change our prime minister every 3-4 years. We just, in fact, in the last year, there was two parties together running the government, the two opposing parties, and they said, you know what, you be the prime minister this year, I'll be the prime minister next year. Okay, cool. No difference. Nothing changed. and things happen, and the government moves forward. Can you imagine that here if they were like to share something? So that helps a lot because companies know what they're getting. They're going to spend $1 billion on a life science pharmaceutical plant. They want to know that it's still going to be there and that we're not going to just suddenly change the rules and increase the tax and change whatever it might be. Enhanced focus on sustainability and green recovery. So like a lot of countries around the world, we are very focused on that. So we're able to give grants towards companies to ensure that they build buildings that are sustainable. We're over 70 years. The track record is really key because for American companies in particular are always a bit more nervous about where to go and who else is there. What have they done? Whereas you can get an Asian company like, yeah, let's do it into Europe, good. But the Americans, you have to persuade them. And I say, just name your company. What are you in? Like cybertech. Okay, here's all the companies that are already there. All their competitors are there. So the fact there's 70 years, there's 1,800 companies. So our competition would be, say, Eastern Europe. In countries, they're trying, like Poland and places, they're trying to attract them there. They say it's cheaper to hire people there. I say, but who else is there? Well, there's not as many companies, and the reality. So those things change. So if you want to go, I would say, if you want to go somewhere cheap, don't come to Ireland. If you want to come somewhere great, come to Ireland. So it's up to you. And they figure it out from there. Highly educated, and we also have the youngest population in Ireland. So that's also a huge advantage. And there's a slide on that. Consistent pro-business policy. So the fact that we even exist, any of the companies, I look after them here, my colleagues in Ireland, they have any issue, any problem, they call me up. We can talk rightly to the government and say, hey, can you change that policy because that's affecting people? Or how can we do this? Or we can influence it. The universities, they're able to go in and influence the curriculum. And they say, yeah, the graduates we're getting in this, they don't know enough about cyber. Can we get them to train on that? So yeah, let's go in and we'll change the curriculum so that they get jobs when they come out. So we are very involved with the companies their whole life cycle through. We have an unwavering commitment to the EU membership. We somehow have to say this to everyone because of what the UK did. We are not going anywhere because we see the benefit. And I think, truthfully, if the UK had it to do over again, they were like, actually, can we have that vote again? Because it didn't quite work out as they'd said. So yeah, but we are unwavering. So that makes us now the only English-speaking country in the EU, which is actually a huge advantage to American companies who have a bit of a fear of foreign languages. And that helps a lot. So it means they get their contracts and everything is done through English, right? So there's no other country in Europe. There's countries in Europe that speak good English, but you won't get your bank statements in English. So, if you want to do business easily, that does help a lot. And again, as we're a huge partner in that, and, we have industry and innovation clusters, so we strategically planned where they go. So if a company says, oh, I'm in medtech, I'm like, okay, here are the 2 places in Ireland I think you should set up, because here's where all the cluster is and the university that focuses on that. So we influence where they go to in that respect to try and help. So this is something that's really helpful to have, is the IMD World Competitiveness Ranking. So it's an independent ranking of how all the countries compare in the world. So it's not me saying this, but it's fact. So Ireland comes number 1 in all of these. The investment incentives, so the grants that we're able to give them. Our attitudes towards globalization, we're very pro, because we're this tiny island, like I said. Now, we're very impacted by globalization too, because something goes wrong, we're all impacted. So the downturn in tech this year, thousands of jobs are going out of Ireland. And there's some policy now around China that impacts our companies who are there. So all of these things impact us, but we also benefit hugely from it. We can't be insular saying Ireland first. No, we're like globally first. The flexibility and adaptability of our workforce. So we are number 1 in this every single year. And I think the reason really behind this is so many companies from so many countries around the world in Ireland. There's a Japanese and a German and an American company. And if any of us go to work, we go, oh yeah, American company, they'll pay you really well, but they want you to work nonstop, crazy hours, they own you. Japanese, different cultures, so we get it. And we go into that company and we go, okay, so this is how the Germans do it, this is how the French do it. And we adapt, very flexible. And the other thing about Irish people is, because for generations we have all lived. You will not find an Irish person who has not lived in another country. We all have. Every single one of us. And that we have to go, like I have to come here, slow down my speech, adapt to my culture, all of these things. There's certain things you have to adapt to. So I can adapt to American culture because I've been here. So I think that makes us very adaptable. And when you hire people, you can say, okay, here's how we do it. And they're not going to say, no, we're going out and strike. We don't like this. This is how it's done in France or whatever it might be. We're like, no, we just adapt and we're flexible and we're just kind of easygoing, I think. We're just, okay, that's how you want it. That's fine. And attracting and retaining talent, because think of all the graduates all over Europe and Spain and Italy and Greece, and they're like, come out of college, like, where am I going to get a job? And their economies aren't doing as well as ours. They're like, well, if I go to Ireland, I can learn perfect English. Great fun place to be. All these great companies are there, and I can get a job with them. And because you're in the EU, you just get on a plane and you go and you live in Ireland and you work there. You don't need a visa, you don't need anything. And so now 19% of our population were not born in Ireland. 19%. Can you imagine? So Brexit, I'll just talk briefly about that. I'm sure you all know about Brexit, right? It was UK voted to leave. It was not a great thing for us because when we had our battle to win Ireland back, part of Ireland is still in the UK. So Northern Ireland, we're 32 counties, and 6 at the top are still part of the UK. So we have one island, one is in the EU and one is not. There's no border. You just drive up and down to Northern Ireland, you don't even notice. And when we play sports and music, like Rory McEvoy, the golfer, he's from Northern Ireland, he says he's Irish. It's all a bit confusing. Have you watched Dairy Girls, actually? That's a good show to watch. That give you some insights on Netflix. Very funny. But yeah, so the way it works in Northern Ireland is quite complicated because when we separated, everybody who tended to be Protestant moved to Northern Ireland. So Northern Ireland was predominantly Protestant, and so those who wanted to be part of Republic were Catholic, and that's where the whole battle up there happened, all the troubles, as they referred to it back in the 1970s. But for every, like when we play Irish rugby, it's north and south. We're one island. When musicians play Snow Patrol, one of my favourite bands, they're from Belfast. They say they're Irish. They don't say they're Northern Irish. They don't say they're British. What really bugs us though in the British media, they always refer to them as British. They even say U2 are from Dublin. This British band U2. We're like, no, they're Irish. This big battle about claiming each other. So like for us, Brexit was a huge mistake. UK, like England, like UK is made up of obviously Northern Ireland, Scotland, Wales and England. They were our biggest trading partner. Like half our relatives went to live there during the famine. So loads of people in England are part Irish. We could sell our goods to them, and everything was shipped to the UK and then down to Europe. But now since Brexit, look what's happened. We're having to have direct routes around. We're having to get out of the UK and go around to other countries. And direct ferries going to other directions because all the products that are made in Ireland have to get to Europe and beyond, and they can't go through the UK because it's all slowed down and they have these customs and they have extra tariffs. And then what's happened in the UK, they can't get staff because they said nobody's to come live there. And if you were from the EU and you lived there, they say, oh, you can stay here, but you need to pay us $5,000 now for a visa. They're like, I'll just go to Ireland. The same company works there, they have an office anyway. And so all this brain drain. And then the universities were getting research grants from the EU, and they're like, yeah, we're not giving you the money anymore. And they're, what do you mean? Like, well, that's what you voted for. You're out of the EU. And then the British guys go down in France and Spain on holiday to their holiday homes, and they get to the airport and say, can we see your passport? Do you have permission to come? They're like, what do you mean? I say, well, you voted to leave the EU. You don't get to just come and live in our country and use our healthcare, and that's what you voted for. And people are shocked. They're like, but that's not what we just thought it was going to stop all these immigrants coming into the country. And actually, all the immigrants can still come because the UK was a colony for India, Pakistan, all these countries, and the agreement with them is they are free to come and live in the UK because they're part of the colony. So I don't know, the only people they're stopping, they can't even stop the Irish because there's an agreement that we can do it too. But other European countries now have to get permission, and they're just not bothered. They'll just go, you know what, we'll just go to other countries, and that's what's happened. So they're struggling, their economy has gone down, it hasn't recovered, and it's all about access to talent. It's so important. So yeah, so that's just from our perspective. We wish it didn't happen, but the one upside is, for my job, is all those companies that might have gone to London are now, you know what, we'll just go to Ireland. So we've had over 100 companies move from, that were already in the UK, and move out, because they have to be within the EU for the regulation. If you have a medical device, if you have a financial product, it has to be within EU rules, and it has to be in the EU. And London's no longer in the EU, it's in Europe, but not in the EU, so they all had to move their businesses. So we've been pretty busy since Brexit. Oh, and here's the irony of it all. All the British people who applied for an Irish passport because their grandparents or parents were Irish because they wanted to travel freely in the EU, so we've been inundated with applications for EU passports from the people who voted to leave the EU. But anyway, So briefly on the Irish economy, this is kind of, we've got the changing world. These are all the things we're worrying about all the time. Like what's going on here, there's technology, there's the supply chain issues, COVID, like everything stopped getting delivered. Talent shortage is always a worry. Future of work, AI, where is that going to lead to? Geopolitics. There's so much inflation right now, the rebound. So all of these things are all the things we have to worry about. And our tax rate. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the fact that all the global tax rate in the whole world is now, there's an agreement between every country to move it to at least 15%, so that it's a kind of more level playing field. So that's all kind of a worry and a concern. So our labour court, yeah, so the population of Ireland, this is really interesting. Look at our map here. So back in the, see here we're back to famine times, go all the way down now and go all the way back up. So our population is growing. Most countries in the world it's dropping. There's an older population and ours is growing. So it's a combination of, I don't know, we just like to have kids in Ireland, all the families are bigger. I'm from a family of 7, that's like average, you know, and so people just have kids. We're more pro-family in that respect, I think, but also the immigrant immigration. All the people were, you know, anybody can go. Any of you guys want to come live and work in Ireland? You can do it. Get your visa in 6 weeks.
6 weeks?
Yeah, even 2. There's no issue. There's no problem. So anybody who wants to come, I'll give you an example. The Ukrainian war broke out. So Ukraine is not yet part of the EU. They want to become part of the EU now. So they wouldn't be legally allowed to come and live in the EU. We brought 85,000 Ukrainians, majority like women and children because the men had to stay behind and fight, into Ireland. 85,000. That'd be like if America took 6 million in. And the minute they got off the plane, we gave them a social security number, housing, free healthcare, and their kids were in school uniforms in school within 24 hours.
You could never.
And the majority of those people, if they wanted to work, and they all did, are working. And they're working in hotels and restaurants and technology companies, whatever their skill set is. The kids are in school and they're learning English and they're helping the other kids. And it's been a massive integration. Now, a huge cost to the government because we've had to house them and help them. But what are we going to do? Like, we went through this. We went through a famine. Nobody helped us. So we want to be able to return the favor. But that's a positive. And so all of these jobs that we were struggling to fill have now been filled by this influx of people. And so it's been really rewarding for everybody. And actually what they did is they said to Irish people across the country, is anyone willing to take someone into their home? And I think 6,000 homes they took, you know, somebody into their home for free to live with them for over a year now, just to try and help out. That's kind of the nature of things. But anyway, so our net migration levels are the highest. You know, we're having a lot of people come through. Our population now since 2022 is 5.15 million, so over 5 million for the first time since the famine, which is terrific. It's an 8% increase in the previous census. And our unemployment has fallen to 3.8%, but that's not an issue because we're always getting more people coming in. So the unemployment is so, like 3.8 is considered full employment because there's always going to be maybe 3.8 who can't or won't work for different reasons, right? So we're at full employment and companies come in and say, I'm going to hire 1,000 people to do this. And we're like, but they hire them because they get them from all over Europe and it's never an issue. And we get them grants or we get them visas to come in. So that's not a problem. So I would say, yeah, the number one reason companies will tell you, across the board, why are you in Ireland? They will say the people. Quality and access to talent is the number one reason. So again, look at this here. We have the youngest population in the EU. So there's that's our current population and that's the age profile. So the working population, look, is massive. It's where all the big numbers are. So 1/3 of our population are under 25 and almost half are under 34. If you compare that to countries like Japan, you know, it's the opposite, right? So, and Ireland's old age dependency is quite low. So we just have a lot of, yeah, and it continues. Like, I mean, I would live my own family, a lot of my sister's 4 kids. Like, it's just very common to have kids. So we can see it's not like here in other countries where everyone's having 1 or 2 or none. That continues to grow, which is really helpful for any economy, and it's an important aspect of it. So the skilled workforce is really, really important to companies. So we have the highest level of STEM graduates per capita in the EU. And we have, as I said, like our 3rd level qualification. The average of in EU to have a 3rd level qualification is 42%. We're over 62%. So the fact that everyone gets a college degree, and I mean across Europe it is free too. It's just not that a cost factor. I think there's just a culture around education in Ireland. It's really important to people. So you can see there then the various attainments. So Ireland's at the top, and there are all the various countries all the way down to Italy, about 29%. And we work very closely with the various institutions as well. So the fact that people are skilled and educated.
So you use the term 3rd level, that would...
3rd level for us
College
is the
level.
college level. Yeah, 3rd level is beyond. So we've Yeah, primary, secondary, which is your high school and middle school together, and third level means you go on to college. So yeah, look, there's a list of where we are in terms of the international workforce, 19%. That's up from 18% last year. So the 19% of people in this little island at the edge of Europe were not born there, but they chose to come and live there. So that's a pretty critical number as well. And then you look down at the other countries, way, way lower in terms of that. And that's a choice. You know, any of these countries could choose to invite immigration to their country. We choose it. We welcome it because it has only benefited us. We're at 5 million. We can get back up to 8 million. We know that's how many was there before the famine. So that's our goal. Labour productivity as well. We're super high on this productivity scale. Again, what's behind that? I think it's just, I don't know, this is kind of in our DNA as Irish people. We're just hardworking. I mean, when you look back when America was first built, and you know that famous, have you ever seen that famous photograph of these builders sitting on the edge on that? They were all Irish guys, right? So sitting out, having a lunchbox up, building these high rises in New York. So Irish, they first came and they were the builders. First of all, there were signs up saying no Irish need apply. Nobody wanted to see the Irish. In Britain, they're here. And little by little, they proved themselves to be hard workers. And they got into that. And then they got into the police and the firemen. And then they got into politics. And then John F. Kennedy, his dad was born in Ireland. He was the first Irish president. And actually, most of the presidents that you've had in the last number of decades have had some Irish connection. So that's a big legacy for us, that we eventually got into that influencing role and politics role. So I think all that adds to our productivity stats as well. Labour costs, this is kind of how much it would cost to hire someone, and this is kind of aggregated some, but you know, Ireland's pretty low. When you look at the euro area, we're just above that, the EU standard, and all the other countries that might seem like more attractive but are actually more expensive to hire someone. So we try and keep those costs low. We're like 12th in the EU, which is pretty strong when you look at the other countries above us. And then, you know, we've been very adaptable, again, to the home working, very flexible. Most companies now in Ireland, first of all, they said everyone's to be remote, then everyone's to be in the office. Now we're doing a hybrid, no issue. We don't have unions in Ireland pretty much, actually. Just don't need them. Just talk to the people, figure it out. So people, again, I think it's back to that adaptability and flexibility that we have. So the majority of, I've never heard of a strike in Ireland. I've actually never come across a strike. We just don't do that. Whereas in France is one of the countries you hear about all the time, they strike for everything, right? So it's just not a culture that we have, and that's very attractive for American companies, as you can imagine. I think there's some factories, traditional factories there that would still have unions, but they just come to agreements every year on how do we get this. Like, I work for the government, so there's a union for us. We're never going out and strike, but they come to the government. And actually, back in the crash in 2008, the financial crash, every single person who worked for the government had their salaries cut by 15% overnight. And we just all accepted it. What are we going to do? We're not going to strike. Like, it is what it is. So, you know, when it came to COVID, actually, it was quite interesting. We had one of the highest rates of taking the vaccine and compliance and no issues. There was no fighting about it all. And they said part of it was our Irish people trust the government. We trust our leaders. If they come out and say, this is what you have to do. So they came to us and said, okay, all of you, your salaries are cut for 15%. And it took, I think, 10 years for them to add it back 1% a year, bit by bit, as things improved. But that's just how it happened. But we didn't hear about any strikes. I think the only time there was a strike is they tried to take free travel away from the over 70s. I'll never forget it. And all the elderly people marched, came up on their free travel, came to Dublin, had this big march, and they reversed it the next day. So that was one time, that wasn't quite a strike, but I guess a protest. But it was kind of a funny one.
Let me pause on that for just a second, because, you know, the UAW is on strike now in the United States. And last year, I took some students to Italy, and we changed planes in France, and there was a strike then. It was messed up all our flights and everything. Yeah. So say again, how would you describe or quantify the presence of unions in Ireland? So there are some, but
very low, very low. I mean, for all the clients I have, all the technology companies, all the internet. Now, it's not that you can't, like, right. You can choose to be in a union, but I think the companies just come to agreements with their staff, and if they have an issue, they can raise it, and they choose not to be. So there might be companies that have a couple of staff who are in a union, but it never comes about. There's certainly never strikes. There's never, never hear about that. But what they do is they discuss in advance. So, like, I remember the hospital doctors wanted a new contract, and there was a big to do about that. And right now the guards, so like the police force, for example, are not allowed to strike. There's a law against that, I think. But anyway, so they're trying to get change in their improvements because they're critical. So if they went on strike, where would the country be? So certain roles, like you can't have the police force all on strike. Oh God, there'd be lawlessness everywhere. Probably more that everybody was just drinking late in the bars more than anything else. But anyway, so they just come to agreements, collective agreements they call them.
In regards to that crash, whenever everybody lost 15% of their salaries, how quickly was like a plan made or made publicized? Was a plan made to kind of like quell any concerns of people getting mad, or did it truly just?
It just didn't happen. I mean, I was one of them, yeah. And I mean, I had a mortgage and a car payment and all the things people have to pay. I think it was just, look, our government's in trouble. A lot of people lost their jobs, first of all. So those of us who were in the government had jobs for life. We're not going to lose our jobs. So it was like, there was a big battle about private sector, public sector, because the public sector was safe. And so I think it was nearly like a political calculation to say, okay, we need to make the public sector suffer a little too. But we just had no choice. And yeah, so that's how it was. And, I think, but the fact that they were able to do it, they just brought in a law overnight and all our salaries were cut across the whole public service for the whole country. For everyone who works in a university, in a hospital, in a school, in a government, everyone, like everybody who would be paid by government was cut. And a lot of cases, like couples would have been cut, right? So there could have been a teacher married to a cop and they were cut, yeah. But it was kind of the collective, we call it the national hangover. Like we all lost our minds on the housing bubble and then it all crashed. Yeah. But we did bail out the banks, which is still very controversial because all the banks who overlended to everybody who should have crashed, but the government did and said we're guaranteeing all the loans. So the developers never had to pay back the money, the banks were fine, and we have one of the biggest national debts in the world because of it. And but then we're able to pay it back now because we're getting all this money from corporation tax,
Were there any, so you said you bailed out the banks, was there just like a few that you bailed out or all of them?
It had to be all of them. It was this massive dramatic thing because IMF, the International Monetary Fund, were coming in and they could have declared Ireland bankrupt, which would have been devastating for us because then it meant we couldn't pay back our own loans. And then it meant the investment was going to stop and companies would go, well, I don't want to be in Ireland. That's like, and we had this political stability and all of this stuff. So it was a calculated cost and it was an overnight thing where we don't have a lot of banks in Ireland. There was 4 main banks and they went to the government like at midnight to say, hey, we've something to tell you. We're all broke. And the decision had to be made because literally the next day, like the IMF, and the IMF did come, and part of it, like they did put restrictions in, and they didn't allow certain things. So were there to control us for a while. Like we did drop down because of it. It was a massive, but a lot of countries in the world had something similar. We weren't unique in that. But I think how we handled it was considered to be really good, and we've recovered, and our economy has. But there is discussion like we could have let one of those banks fail because that was one bank that was now found out to be doing all kinds of scams and crazy stuff, and one developer took out billions in loans and he crashed, and they could have just but they didn't have all the full facts and they had to make a decision fast, so they decided for the wider economy, but then we all had to pay the price, and everyone's insurance policy in the whole country got an extra 5% fee towards paying back some of these things. So everyone who didn't benefit from it is ended up paying the price. The downside.
Were you in Ireland at this time?
I was.
Okay, how did that affect you personally and people how did it affect the day-to-day life for people in Ireland?
It was really impactful. It was shocking. And at my time, at the time, my job was actually not working for IDA Ireland, but a company called Enterprise Ireland that helps Irish companies only. Helps them all get set up and running and export overseas, and all these small companies were like, oh my God, everything just stopped. Everyone stopped spending, everyone panicked. For the next number of years we had the greatest savings in the history of the state because everybody was afraid of what might happen. So it was a really, really serious thing, and people lost their homes. So it was very dramatic, but I will say, we don't have bankruptcy laws in Ireland. You can't just say I'm bankrupt and walk away from your debt. You can claim bankruptcy, but the debt follows you forever. So why would you do it? So it was really, really serious at the time, and it was just a sense of, I would say, a sense of panic. And I was trying to help companies, and it was really desperate because we couldn't give them any money. But what I did is I set up this network of entrepreneurs in the area of Ireland I was in. So the successful entrepreneurs who hadn't been impacted lent money to the smaller entrepreneurs to help them keep going or try give them business and help them get started. So we kind of had to figure it out for ourselves, but that's what we've always had to do as a nation. Like, we can't look to other people, we have to just, you know, pull up our socks and figure it out, and that's what we did. But now, 10 years later, like, Ireland's flying it again. But before that, they called it the Celtic Tiger. But Ireland was roaring ahead, and like all the economy was the fastest growing, and people kind of, how is this, like, you know, we're going out of control here, like a lot of countries. But yeah, so we were very impacted. And then because the US was so impacted, that impacted everything we do. Right, so all these economies, all these companies pulled back or closed or slowed down. So we're always caught in this wave. We're caught in one right now this year because a lot of the tech companies have pulled out or slowed down, and so that's going to affect like our next year's budget that we have to pay for everything. So we're always very impacted. We're a small open economy, as we call it. So we're very impacted by what's going on around us, which is why we're open, because if we close off, we have nothing. But we have to ride that wave. But everything in economics is a wave, you know. You can't see it when you're in it, but when you come out the other side, you're like, okay. And you know what? It was a good thing because it taught everyone. People were buying holiday homes in Spain and Bulgaria that never even visited, and they just buying them off the plans. The taxi driver had 3 homes. I'm like, what the heck? How do you got 3 homes? I didn't pay for my one. It was out of control. Like, people were spending. So, you know, it was a necessary correction.
Okay.
But I think the people who paid the price are not the people who benefited most. That's the harsh part of it, but that's the reality. Like, I pay 50% tax in Ireland, income tax, but I have free healthcare and free education, so I'm fine with that. And I have a life I can afford there, not here. It's a whole other ballgame. So I can afford to live well on that, even if I pay. So I pay the high. So you pay tax based on how much you earn. And yeah, so like majority of us are paying 50%, but we're supporting those who have less. And that's kind of our culture of like, of course we do. Why would you not? Like, you want to see everyone rise up. That's what they call socialism. It's not a negative thing. It's actually really positive because you're helping everyone. And there's nobody on the streets. Everybody's housed. If people need help when they do, they get unemployment. So when COVID hit and most of the jobs were gone and nobody could work, what do? They gave every single person in Ireland a salary into their account. And they were sitting at home waiting for the COVID to end. You could do that because that's what you do. You help people in a crisis. You don't let them be homeless. You don't let them, you know, and then we pay the employers. They said, we'll give you money if you keep paying them until we're over this. So, okay. So they paid them to keep them going too. And that's kind of more of the culture of how we do things.
You said that there's bankruptcy in Ireland, but you can't discharge debt under bankruptcy. Is that true for companies and individuals?
Depends how they're set up. So if it's a limited company,
Right.
they usually have some protection, but then there's always some personal guarantees behind a lot of those. So you don't really escape it. It's not a path people take.
Right.
I don't know anybody. And then for 10 years you can't do anything. Like anything. So you're never going to get a loan again. You're not going to get a mortgage again. Your whole life is held up then, right? So people don't want that.
Going on the graph on the last slide with the people working from home, has there been any like significant impact on like productivity and stuff just from more people working at home or less?
We're not hearing that. I mean, I think like a lot of the companies here are all like, I mean, Michael Dell is one of my clients down in Austin. He's like, this is great. Everyone's going to work from home forever. He's changed it. So a lot of them are going, actually. So what I'm hearing is like salespeople, like I'm a salesperson, right? I cracked up working from home and all those Zoom calls, it's just not who I am. I want to see people, look them in the eye, talk to them. So I struggled with it massively. So certain personalities and certain roles, you know, so what I'm seeing now is they're trying to get people to come in 2-3 days a week, but they definitely, and even Dell are saying, well, we want the engineer team in because they need to be able to like talk and figure things out, sales and support people because they're just not as productive. So there's certain roles, yeah, and I think it's just rolled over to the Irish, but the Irish aren't resisting it. Like here, people moved state because they were told they could live somewhere, you know, forever. In Ireland, it takes you 2 hours to drive from one side of the country to the other, so nobody was too far from where they live.
Would you say that since those 4 main banks were covered by the government, that there's not a large fear of bank runs in the country.
Probably none. Yeah.
Because you know that the banks are covered.
Yeah, and the worst of the banks did close down and had to collapse. And what happened is the government had massive shares and control because they bailed them out. So the two main banks, we're only down to two now because the others have kind of pulled out a bit as well. But the two main banks, you know, were partly owned by the government, so they weren't allowed. We decided you can't pay your CEOs any more than this. You can't give bonuses. So we control what happened. We're like, okay, but now, little by little, they've paid back the money to the government that they were bailed out for, so they're independent again and can do their own thing. So the financial service team would say it has had kind of a negative impact in that respect because financial service companies want to come in and think they can do whatever they want, right? But my attitude is like I'd rather be playing it safe and know that we're not going to have crazy crypto stuff that happens here and people like worth 20 billion and zero the next day, and so we won't have any of that. Yeah. So you had a question in the back, yeah.
Yeah, you said that there was kind of a natural consensus of people doing really hard work in Ireland. I've heard in other classes that a lot of like the organizational culture in European countries is that there's a lot of profit sharing. Is that pretty standard in Ireland? Or no?
So in sense that the employees get to share in the profits of the company?
Yes.
No, that's not pretty common. Actually, it's funny because some of the companies that come into Ireland that we deal with, they say, oh, we want to give them, you know, shares as part of their package. No, they don't want the shares. What they want is an extra week's holidays. You know, and then the other thing I say is, you know, the way here you have that unlimited holiday policy, do not do that in Europe because people will take the holiday. Here it's been shown that when they offer unlimited holidays, people take even less holidays. In Ireland and in Europe, our attitude is we live to work. No, we work to live. You guys live to work. So I take 6 weeks vacation every summer and I switch off my phone and no one contacts me. And that's how it is. And everyone does that. So the culture across Europe is quite different. Like Southern Europe would be more known to be more relaxed in that, and like the French and the Italians and the Spanish, like their 2 hours lunches. Not that they don't get the work done, but they prioritize personal life. I think Americans could learn a lot from it, to be honest. With 2 weeks holidays a year, God, never. It's just crazy. Like you're not productive. You can't be. And the fear of losing your job. Another thing you can't do in Europe is you can't just fire someone. You know, the movies, they get the box and they walk out the door. Never going to happen in Europe. They have rights. You can't just fire someone and tell them they're leaving that day. Like it seems so cruel to us that you would do that. The personal impact that has on a family. So you have to just, you know, pay them money or give them time. Yeah.
So just to clarify what you said, there's a right to work in Ireland.
There's a right to work in the sense of if you're employed by somebody, once you're employed. Now, Ireland and England actually have one exception. It's closer to America in that everybody can be on trial for the first 6 to 12 months. So within the trial period, but the person knows they're on trial, you can let them go and it doesn't cost you anything. But after that period, if you were to let people go, you have to go through a process. So start with a verbal warning, then it's a written warning later if another incident, and then a final warning. And then even if you are letting them go, you have to give them, depending how long they've worked for you, but it's a minimum, like the government set out the minimum, so it has to be at least like 1 week's salary for every year they worked for you, or, you know, but most companies, and it's happened this year, right? So it happened with, like, remember Twitter wanted to fire everyone around the world? And they tried to fire the team in Ireland. Oops, actually, Elon, there's laws, you can't do that. And he had to reverse the whole thing, and one of his main staff took him to court in Ireland, and he said, okay, the team in Ireland, you're not fired. So we have more protections in terms of employment law, and that's pretty prevalent across Europe. So we have companies who set up in another country, and then they go, oh, because my dad's from Portugal, let me set up there. And then they go, ooh, Portuguese business culture is a nightmare. And I'm like, okay, so do you want to move it to Ireland? But for them to shut down that Portuguese operation, they had to pay so much money, like a year's salary to people. And so there's a lot more restrictions around that in different countries. And every country has their own rules. So Ireland's more, what I say to companies is, you've got a year to decide. And I said, if you can't figure out in a year this person is right or wrong for you, then you know what, you owe them money because you haven't done your due diligence. So, but you have a year. And if you can't decide in a year that this person's right for my company, then yeah, you do have to pay. So when you say right to work, I mean, yeah, I would say that. And then they have our minimum wage is also much higher. Like it's almost like $13 an hour. And nobody in the country for any job can get paid less than that. Everyone's guaranteed 20 days paid holiday a year. 20 days, no matter what your job is. So, and we get, other national holidays as well. And if you're sick, you get paid while you're sick and you're off. Wow.
Dollars or euros?
I'm saying dollars. Like in euros, it's like 11.45.
Cool.
I was translating. Sorry.
Appreciate that. I appreciate
No
that.
problem. All right, so there's a couple more slides I think left. Yeah, that was just so I guess, so as I said earlier, we have an unwavering commitment. So like our most recent poll, we asked people, 71% would say they'd stay in the EU. That's relative to 45% of most EU countries. So we're unwavering in our commitment to the EU. And in terms of best places in the world to live by the OECD Human Development Index is one of the indexes they use. So we're pretty high up there. I mean, Switzerland, Norway, Iceland, these are always amazing countries, but they're very expensive to live in. But they have great, like you get a year off if you have a baby, whether you're the father or the mother. Each of you gets a year off paid and all that kind of thing. So Ireland, you get 6 months, so relative to those things. But I remember seeing a survey once saying the Irish children are the happiest children in the world. I think it was because, the quality, like the safety, right? Not going to get shot if they go to school. The quality of the air, the quality of the food, the family life, all of that. So, all of those type of things. And then there's just two other slides. Yeah, so here's another ranking that was put in about innovators across Europe. So as you can see, they have strong innovation leaders of the various countries in Europe. I presume you all know which one's Ireland here on the left. You never know. So that's a big goal for us to be striving towards being known as one of the most innovation countries across Europe. And then you see all the southern countries we talked about, less innovative, moderate, And the most innovative are those countries but they have fewer population and, more money to invest. It's all relative and it's all a comparison to that. And then this is just the final slide is about the tax topic. I don't know if you want to talk about that, but there's an agreement now that all countries in the world have to move to 15%. So we have to move from 12.5% to 15% if you earn more than 750 million in revenue. So most companies don't.
Yeah.
And everyone pays the same tax in Ireland. So every single business, if you're the taxi driver, a local shop owner, or a multinational company, everyone pays 12.5%. So there's a concept sometimes that Ireland is this tax haven and tax, we don't. Our corporation taxes remain the same. It is lower in most countries, and that means we get less as a government, but you know what? We earn more because we get employment taxes when the people are employed, right? We don't have to pay unemployment benefits to those who aren't employed. And Irish companies created, so the more that we can bring in, and we bring them in because the tax is favourable, it benefits the whole economy, lifts us all up. But it's a long-term strategy because we're not going to get as much money as we possibly could. Even 1% change would make some massive difference to Ireland, but we want that stable. We want companies to know you invest, we're not going to change anything. So that's the end of my presentation. We're coming up at 12 o'clock, so if anyone else has any questions, yeah, go ahead.
From living in both the U.S. and Ireland, what would you say are some of the biggest cultural differences that you've noticed personally?
I love living in America. I've been working for 30 years, and about half of those I've spent in America, and I come over and back. So I've lived in New York, Boston, Atlanta, Austin. So I go over and back all the time. And I do love America. But as I say to people all the time, America's great for me because I'm English speaking, white, and educated. So I think for me, I'm in this category that I have more benefits than a lot that I observe around. You take some of those away, it's just a little more of a struggle. It does concern me, definitely the political situation at the moment, just all that animosity, we all feel that, right? But just, to catch you when you fall. And I hear people talk about socialism here now as if it's a terrible thing. Oh my God, those socialists. I'm like, so we help everyone? How is this bad? But they just turned a word into making it something super negative. But what it means is that whatever you're going through in your life, whatever crisis you have, a mental health crisis, or you lose your job, or you have a divorce, you're not left with nothing, which is the reason most people end up struggling here, right? So something happens and a relationship falls apart and a guy generally has to move out of the house and where is he going to live? And, there's no supports there. The support system just isn't there. So I feel that's a negative. But I think the positive is, you reach for the stars, the American dream. If you work hard enough, you can get what you want. And I think that's so impressive. And so my oldest brother was really smart at maths. He's an actuary. And, he qualified as the youngest ever actuary in Ireland and England years ago now. He couldn't get a job because they were like, if you can't be an actuary at 20, 21. Like, nobody would take him seriously because usually you'd be 30 by the time you qualify. And he was going to interviews, they're like, could you grow a beard? You know, could I make this guy look older? But he went on holidays to California to visit some friends and met people and they said, so you're the youngest ever to qualify as an actuary in Ireland and England. He was offered 3 jobs. He's never gone home. He's lived in the US ever since. Because they saw that as magic. Let's grab this. But he didn't fit the tradition, old school, you know, how you have to look to be a certain. So I think that kind of attitude in America is great and that very welcoming and you know, if people work, they get what they want. It is more expensive to live here by far, I would say. And when I go back to Europe in general, just the cost of everything and the scale of everything, everything's smaller and simpler and you don't need as much stuff. We don't care about the brand names. Like, everyone has to have an iPhone. You won't see an iPhone half of Europe because they just have whatever Android they can get and they have it for 10 years and nobody really cares. Nobody's wearing brand name anything. So I just think it's simpler. When I go back there, I feel like a weight is lifted off my shoulder. It's just like simple life, family life, spending time with friends. I don't know, it's just, yeah. And the food here scares me. Like, your food never goes off. Like, it's terrifying. Like, in Ireland, if I buy bread and I leave it sit there, in 2 days there's going to be mold on it. Here, it's still soft, sitting in there for a week. It shouldn't be. Like, you're allowed to put stuff into your food here that is illegal in Europe. To prolong it, like, your food industry has this monopoly. And the taste, everyone says, you just go to Ireland, I mean, you were there, everything tastes more natural and organic and, you know, you have, and it's from all over the different countries, but it's just, so that worries me what you guys do to your food as well, yeah. So, I mean, it just varies. I like both sides. I mean, every time I go back, I'm glad to go back, and I miss it here and I come back here. So I like both sides. But I do think Americans are very inward looking. Like, I think the stat about the number of Americans who even have US passports is kind of shocking. You need to travel more. I know you're of a big country, but my God, like, those who travel, it just changes who you are. It changes who you are. And so everyone in Europe has traveled because it's so easy to get around to all these different countries, right? But because you travel, you appreciate other cultures and ways of doing things, and you just have more respect for that. And I think when Americans go overseas, they're shocked that everyone doesn't think they're amazing. You know, when I came last summer, my daughter came with her friend from Texas who'd never left the US, and she said, God, I was in the pubs and they were like going, oh, Texas, oh my God, you guys are crazy. I'm giving her, she's like, oh my God, she just thought everything, oh my God, you're American, it's amazing. They'll challenge you and they're like, what are you doing, what's happening, why can't you get your act together? And they'll question things in a friendly way, but that's the general view, like, that you guys have a perception of yourselves that isn't real. So I would just start by encouraging you to listen to media, turn on BBC News, or, you know, follow what's happening in the world, because it's not recorded here. Like, I have to seek out real news because it does not exist here, and you only talk about your own stuff. There's a whole big world out there, and, you know, so I think that's it. I think our perspective is different, and I just think the more you travel, the more you'll get that. And those who have traveled, you can tell. I have a conversation with someone, I can tell they've traveled. They just get it, and they're not as insular in their thinking. So globalization is not a bad thing. Internationalization only helps us. Like, we can't close ourselves off from each other. It's just not going to happen. It's just the world is evolving, and it's like trying to stop a running train. You just can't. It's going to happen, and we have had only positive from embracing that ideology. And we have the ups and the downs, absolutely, but, you know, overall and over the long term, we come out on top.
So your job is to promote business or encourage business in Ireland, and you're based in Austin. Given Twitter's experience there, experience with laying off people at Twitter, is there any hope of getting SpaceX or Tesla over there? Because
we're in active conversations about SpaceX with them. You see, these guys are smart. They're like, where's the talent? We're great engineers. Where am I going to get them? They'll chance their arm and let's try shut everything down. And it's been interesting the last year, like Dell being an example of, we're going to shut 5% of our staff, we're going to let it go around the world. Nobody got let go in Ireland. So the companies were like, but who do we have and where are they? Some did across the board, every single country or every office is getting an even. But we see on the whole, when they are letting people go, they've let people go in Ireland, but nothing of the scale in other countries.
Right.
But part of what we do is focus on those higher value roles and make sure that those jobs are critical. So even when they come in, we're always talking to them, saying, hey, you want some grants to train those people up? You want to get a data science degree while you're at it, and we'll give you some money to that, and the college will do this. And so that then when they look where are people, oh, no, the guys in Ireland. And then the other thing in Ireland is they're international headquarters. And they do everything else. The rest of the world all reports into Ireland, and Ireland reports into the US. That's a general strategy. So Ireland is really critical. It's their international. They can shut down offices in different countries and save a bit of money, but you can't shut down your entire international headquarters. And then in terms of strategy, again, a lot of companies, the reason they set up an international headquarters is they want to signal to their shareholders or investors, we're growing, we're going to be international, let's set up an office. And that's a very impressive strategy. And when you're trying to get next round of funding to grow your business, showing that you have that international focus is really critical. Because if you haven't looked beyond, depends on your product obviously, but if you haven't looked beyond your own country in terms of growing your business or services, you're missing a trick, I guess.
All right, well, man, that was really interesting. I can't tell you how much we appreciate you coming and talking with our students.
No worries,
and,
happy to share.
You know, as you know, we're partnering with Dublin City University, so I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity for our TU students to interact with organizations in Ireland. And I believe I heard some of our Jolt students may be going to South by Southwest in Austin this spring. So I don't know. I think a lot of Austin people leave town during South by Southwest, but
Yeah, some do, some don't. But yeah, no, it's a fun festival. It's really good. And I mean, I would just encourage you all at the stage where you're at is find a way to travel, and you can do it cheaply. You can pick up jobs, but just do it. Like, this is the age you can do it, right? So before the mortgage and the kids and everything is hold on, can't do any of this anymore now, I'm locked in. Just take that opportunity, because it will open your eyes, it'll open your mind, and you might just find you might need an alternative somewhere else to live at some point. The trajectory we're on right now in the States, you might be great. I hear a lot of people saying that they want to potentially move away, but you just to have that experience and just see it, and then you'll come back and you'll be able to have more perspective on what's important in life. And I think it's important just to see other parts of the world that maybe they don't have as much as you have, or they haven't got all the benefits. I just think it's a good thing to do. And you can definitely do grad programs there too as well. A lot of students do that. But just, encourage you to just, at this age, it's the only age to do it. I wish I had done more in my 20s, honestly.
well, let's appreciate Mary and thank her for coming. The PowerPoint is on Harvey, and so you'll have access to that if you want to refer back to something she covered today. So we're done for today. We'll see you guys on Tuesday.